Hey, everybody, this is Robert Kinsler.
And this is TJR.
TJ, on January 1st, 2023, Rolling Stone posted an article titled The 200 Greatest Singers of All Time.
Mhm.
This was a list that focused on so-called voices of the ages, and the byline for the article was, quote, by Rolling Stone, and pooled feedback from a number of contributors on the magazine's staff as well as others. Anytime you talk about music, lists are going like this are going to be very subjective. Rolling Stone likely got out of having to focus strictly on the talents of singers by noting these are the vocalists that have shaped history and defined our lives. And, later on in their kind of introduction on the article, they noted that this is a greatest singers list, not the greatest voices list. So I think it's kind of important to say that. By moving deliberately away from classic rock and singers who came of age in the 60s and 70s, Rolling Stone appears to be thumbing its nose at great artists whose impact continues to be felt 50 or more years later. But classics, even beyond the rock era, notably, and to me, Nat King Cole, were also left off the list. I thought what we could do in this episode is we can discuss obvious and sometimes criminal omissions. I mean, you say Jim Morrison, Dave Gahan, Daryl Hall, Paul Rogers, as well as head-scratching inclusions and rankings that defy common sense, even for the casual music fan.
Okay, well, I remember when this, when the list hit, it's been now 5 or 6 days, I think, since it came
Right.
out. Initially, I just wanted to ignore it and not talk about it at all. But you kind of wrote me into it today.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, everybody, you can thank Robert
Yeah.
for getting me on camera to talk about this, because I was just going to try to.
And I'm going to thank a friend of mine, and I won't call him out because I didn't ask for permission, but he sends me this text like,
Yeah.
you and TJ, you need to do something about this list. Have you seen it? And he was obviously,
Mhm.
very disappointed and upset by the list. And these lists, I think, generate that kind of passion. And I think that is one of the reasons Rolling Stone does these kind of lists is probably, it's clickbait. It gets people talking and I'm sure they
Um,
had they were very clear in thinking about it.
yeah, I agree. Rolling Stone is, in my opinion, deliberately thumbing their nose at the generation that originally made them. That was their original readership. And they know what they're doing, in my opinion, because they know this can easily trigger, I will say, us.
Right.
We can be easily triggered by this stuff. And we get outraged. We start texting our friends. We start posting on Facebook. More than likely, we leave a link to the list on Facebook so our friends can go look at it, be
Right.
outraged, join in the conversation, on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever social media. Video creators of our generation will make videos saying this list sucks, it's an outrage, and it'll get spread around, and Rolling Stone's top 200 singers list just grows and grows and grows within the internet algorithms. And their list is now put in front of more people's faces. Other news media picks up on it that, hey, the internet's outraged about this. So now the traditional news media picks up on it and they start doing stories about it.
Right.
And
Right.
it gets everybody talking.
Right. And that's where I first heard about it. It was the focus of a news show where they normally don't talk too much about music. And I was like, wow. So between that and then getting the text from my friend, I go, God, I better check it out. So, like you're saying, I immediately went to Rolling Stone's website and had to read through the entire list. And I did try to, give it a fair shake. And like I said, and I know we're jumping around here a little bit, TJ, there's not you look at their list, especially when you're talking about some of the big names that are on there. I don't have too many complaints about those names. There is a reason they're on the list. But
Mm-hmm.
some of the omissions, like I noted earlier, I was just shocked about some of those omissions. I don't know. Did you want to talk about yours? Some of the
Yeah,
artists you
there are some
thought?
omissions that I wonder about. Some of them are people whose voices I think are amazing.
Mhm.
And some of them are people who I'm not really into at all, but I still see that they're great vocalists. Why weren't there any, I don't care about opera, but why weren't there any great opera singers? I don't think I saw any. Did you see Pavarotti? Did you
No, there
see
wasn't,
Bocelli?
and there was some, and they kind of referenced that in their intro about
Huh?
why, and I didn't even understand clearly why they left them off. Like you said, somebody like Luciano Pavarotti, you talk about, and he was a great singer, but he had a profound influence on rock, especially I'd say kind of in the 1980s, you
On
know.
rock? I'm sorry, I don't see it, hear that, but go ahead and please continue. No, go ahead.
But I mean, just on popular culture, he like was so much a big star that
Mhm.
he was able to bring opera kind of into the
Okay,
pop, the sensibility is maybe what I'm saying.
I hear you.
Yeah, not maybe rock so much, but into the pop world, you
I hear
know.
you. Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
yeah, they did bring more popularity to it, to the audience that normally doesn't even consider opera. You're right.
right.
They did.
I think
Um,
paving the way for somebody like Andrea Bocelli or Sarah Brightman, bringing kind of like the Broadway and opera side of the music world. So maybe you see them on the Grammy Awards, or but you're right. Those probably maybe some of those artists should have been represented on the list. It's
yeah.
since you're going into jazz and gospel and soul and rock, and folk, all the different names we saw on this list.
And I want to give you a chance to finish what you had to say there, but I do want to add in, while you're talking about Broadway and such, um, where was Julie Andrews? One of the greatest female vocalists ever. Where was
Right.
Judy Garland?
Right. Yeah.
Who
Oh my God. Yeah.
who made your, when we were doing our top 100 songs of all time list, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, one of the greatest vocal performances ever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why wasn't Judy Garland on this?
Yeah.
Those are two female singers who, I might buy a record by Judy Garland at some point. I might. I
Mhm.
might.
Right.
And in fact, I might even buy one of Julie Andrews at some point, but I
Right.
haven't so far. But I
Right.
recognize what amazing vocalists they are.
Right.
Now,
Exactly.
and one more I'll mention, then I'll let you talk about yours. But someone that really struck me is, why is he not on there? And I don't give a rat's about his music. Justin Timberlake.
Yeah.
I don't care for one thing he's recorded ever, but I recognize he's a powerhouse of a male vocalist,
Right.
and yeah. So I wasn't sure why he wasn't there. And
It
that's all
might
I'm going to say. But I'll let you talk about some of your omissions that you wonder
it
about.
might be a numbers thing, but some of the names that jumped out at me, I mentioned Nat King Cole, I mentioned Jim Morrison of the Doors, because he was not only a great singer and had a signature sound, but he was very influential as well.
Oh yeah.
You know, arguably I'd say Dave Gahan of Depeche Mode, the first big electronica band to have a worldwide, arena levels kind of impact.
Uh-huh.
Where is he on the list? And Paul Rodgers is widely acknowledged as one of the all-time great singers, not strictly because his voice technically, but just because of the emotion and the power he
Mhm.
brings to his performances. And then also going a little further, Ann Wilson of the band Heart, I'd say,
She wasn't on it.
she wasn't on the list.
Oh wow.
Colin Blunstone of the Zombies. I mean, obviously have a lot of bias here. I'm a huge Zombies fan,
Yes.
but he is an amazing singer, and then in maybe not quite as high as the others, but also I would kind of make maybe Daryl Hall and Brad Delp of Boston. I think that maybe they should be on the list.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like we're talking, there's a lot of great singers out there.
For the most part, and like I said, there were some names on the list that I didn't know. So I'm not going to comment on whether they should or shouldn't be on the list. However, one thing I will say, and it's been said about these other lists that they have done, and you and I have both been complimentary about Billie Eilish in the past. We both talked about her favorably.
Yeah, I'm a
Yet I
big fan.
think that artists like her have not had enough history behind them yet to be considered for these types of lists. I think if you start when you've only got a couple albums behind you, you've only had maybe a couple years, less than 10 years, at the very most, you should have at least 10 years before you can start to make a list like this. But when you've still only got a small amount of recorded output behind you, studio recordings that you've made and released, I think that lists like these can fall prey to, it's just a popularity contest.
Right.
And
right.
I think for that reason alone, those artists should just be, for the time being, excluded, and that allows more legacy artists a chance to be put in, like the ones you're talking about, like Brad Delp, who I think is amazing. I noticed he wasn't on the list. You're right. It didn't occur to me, but yeah, he's amazing.
I mean, you could probably, I mean, again, there should be BB King been on the list? I mean, in his younger, I saw him back in the early 90s when he was still a formidable vocalist. He maybe should have been on the list, you know. I mean, but again, you know, I like you, I don't know, I'm not, you know, an expert on every name on that list, and like you, I can't genuinely say I've heard of, you know, every single name on that
Yeah.
list. So maybe this is a good chance to discover new artists too. Maybe that was part of the thinking, you know, as
Well,
well.
you can always use these lists for that reason. There was a an artist, Rocio. I wrote down her name, Rocio Durcal. I had no clue who she was, but she's clearly more of a legacy artist. She's not. I don't think she was someone new. I looked at the photo of her. The photo looked like it was from the '60s. And I thought, okay, I don't think this is somebody like new, like a flavor of the month. But this is just a genre I don't know. You know, there was a Hispanic artist, mariachi artist, I guess mariachi singer. I'm guessing. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but you know, clearly this is a genre I know nothing about. Now, in that
Right.
respect, I'm glad that Rolling Stone is including genres that they totally normally would not include in these kinds of things, because everybody deserves a shot. Every genre deserves a shot, whether I like it or not, or anyone else likes it.
Right.
But yeah, there still
Yeah.
were some things that bothered me. I know that one thing that you can drive yourself crazy with if you allow it, you can say, how come this person gets higher than this person?
Right.
And I'll agree. Courtney Love,
Yeah.
you know,
That threw me for a loop when I saw that. Yeah.
yeah,
I was a little that was definitely a little bit of a head scratcher for me there. Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and why would you say that?
Well, to me, because I'm going, okay, you want to make sure female rock singers represented, then maybe you put Shirley Manson of Garbage or Grace Slick of Jefferson Airplane
Yeah,
/ Jefferson Starship. Those are two women that have that they were groundbreaking, super talented vocalists,
yeah.
and they've had some staying power, and they've both proven that, you
Or
know, their impact was there and influence on other artists was great. So,
yeah,
whereas I don't know if you can say that about Courtney Love
yeah.
is and that she's in their league,
As
to be very
opposed to
frank
Ann,
about.
and like you just mentioned, as opposed to Ann Wilson.
Yeah, like another one, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the thinking was behind that, but again, you and I were not on the panel.
Yeah, it's puzzling sometimes, but here's what I'll say. It's easy to get frustrated by that. Like, why is this person so much higher than this person? And I know sometimes this can be subjective. But like, you look at Bono, I thought he should have been a lot higher, don't you?
What was he, like, number 140 or something?
140, 150, something like that. Yeah.
Oh my God, I was shocked. I was
Yeah.
shocked because he's had such I mean, to me, U2's like one of the more significant artists to come up
Yeah.
since the 80s, and they've stayed. They're not just a legacy artist.
I agree. Yet if you read the entry, forget the number and just read the entry.
Right.
The entry for him was very complimentary, summed him up perfectly, in my opinion. So to a certain extent, I wish we wouldn't number these things. I wish we just say, here's a list.
Right.
But I guess people want an order to it.
They do.
They do want an order. But so I would say just, hey, but he made the list, at least.
Right. He made the list.
You can go crazy because, Michael Jackson, I don't even own Thriller, but he's one of the most influential pop singers of his generation.
Right.
Why is he as low as he is in the 80s?
Yeah.
Why isn't he up there at least in the top 25?
I know.
I don't think you'd argue with me on that.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm looking here because we just talked, jumping back. So Bono was number 140, and he finished behind Axl Rose. Now I'm a fan of Guns N' Roses. I've seen them several times in concert, but I would not put Axl Rose in the same league as Bono. I just would not
either.
I'd not even close. And so I don't know how, if it was some kind of I just don't understand that.
You know what I wish? I wish they'd kind of broken it down, because there's judging vocalists just on their technical ability. And correct me and Celine Dion was not on the list,
right? She was
which
not,
surprised a lot of people.
That's been in the media a little bit.
She's missed technical ability, and she was excluded so that the mainstream, the traditional. I don't want to say mainstream. I hate that term. So like the internet isn't mainstream. Come on.
Right.
But so that the traditional broadcast media would also share in the outrage. I think that was deliberate. So the tradition, because that's something that the traditional broadcast media is not going to ignore. Celine Dion wasn't on this. But if you're just going by technical ability, definitely she has to be there in the top 10.
Yeah.
Just for technical prowess, she has
Right,
to be there,
exactly.
you
For
know.
technical, exactly.
Yeah. And but it's also more about what does this artist communicate when they sing?
Right,
How much are they a voice of their generation? So I guess
right,
you have to kind of say, instead, just be glad they were on the list and just read what they said about them. Because, like Rob Halford, he
right.
should be way high. I think he was 180.
Yeah.
To
He
me,
was
Rob Halford needs to be up there in the top 50, But
Yeah,
what they wrote about him was great. The
yeah,
entry was the way Eddie Van Halen plays guitar. That's Rob Halford on vocals.
right.
To me,
Yeah, it
that
was
was
interesting how I
wonderful.
saw that. Yeah, that was interesting
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean,
perspective.
so I think rather than letting yourself get completely furious about this, read what they said about them and say, hey, did they sum them up right? Did they get them? Did they understand them? Because at the end of the day, we can all keep arguing who should have been greater than the other. And there's nothing wrong with the argument. As long as we don't start to hate each other
Right,
and think less of the other person's for their opinion, because
right,
that's all it is at the end of the day, is a subjective opinion. And quite
right,
frankly, I think I can appreciate these lists more like they did with, say, the top 500 albums, where they polled not just their staff, but outside musicians, songwriters, music educators, music business people, where they pulled a whole bunch of outside sources and then put that together into a list. I have a lot more respect when they do it that way. Yes, you're going to disagree. But I think because they didn't do that this time, I find myself disagreeing a whole lot more than in the previous ones with the album ones, which I know a lot of people hated. Mostly boomers hated because Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin weren't in the top 10. And
right,
at least I don't
right.
think they were.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
I know I remember reading it at the time, but yeah, I did. And there are so many of these kind of lists, and they come about with some regularity that it's almost like this fills the airwaves. It fills up the space now, and then probably in a month from now, no one will be talking about it
no,
anymore.
nobody
Yeah,
will. Nobody will.
yeah,
But at least with like I said, the one like with the top 500 albums where they had all these outside people, Rolling Stone got criticized 15, 20 years ago for it all being white classic rockers.
right, right,
Now they're getting criticized for it not being all white classic
right.
rockers.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
and with the albums, when you're talking to all these younger musicians, younger producers, younger people in the music industry now, they're not going to favor our generation's music as much as their own generation. That's going to
exactly.
happen.
Yeah,
But here,
yeah.
Rolling Stone is it sounds like it's all in-house this time.
I don't remember a lot of specifics, TJ, but I think it was both.
I did read it and I saw no indication, because in the past they've always said, that we polled musicians, we polled songwriters, we polled producers, we polled key business people in the music world. Here it just says, it doesn't really state.
Here's the specifics on it. This new list was compiled. It should have said by our staff. I'll just read it how it appears on their website. This new list was compiled to our staff and key contributors.
That could be a few chosen friends.
Right.
That
right.
could be people within the music industry, but they're not saying.
Right.
In the past, they have said it.
Right.
They've said musicians, songwriters, music educators from across the country. They've said it outright. And I think these lists have a lot more, I respect them a lot more when they do that versus something like this, where it's our staff and some key contributors, because that's very tenuous to me. Very, very tenuous.
It is.
And it leaves them
like
more,
when we talk,
it leaves them more open and deserving to criticism, in my opinion. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. No, like when we talk about our list, and I don't believe we've told people today, although we've said it in the past, for example, in my column, and when we talk about it, we say we're not proclaiming like these were the greatest albums of the year. They may not be the most influential. We say these are our favorite albums, and that's
exactly
where I tend to like, because that's where I live with it now, because I know I'm not maybe let's say listening to as much reggae and death metal as I am to power pop music and classic rock. So I acknowledge where my emphasis is coming from. And I think that's, you just want to be transparent and you want to be honest about it.
Yes, and we both are always saying that these are our personal favorites, our recommendations based on our own personal biases and our
Exactly.
own personal preferences. Yeah. And when we were doing, and we got to finish our top 100 songs of all time list. We got to get back and finish that. People have been asking about that.
Yeah,
Sorry, I don't
we
want
have
to get
to.
sidetracked, but they have been asking about it. We got derailed during the pandemic. We need to get back on and finish. We have 50 more to go. And so
Okay, we need to
promise
do
we'll
that.
do that.
Yeah, we will definitely do that. One thing, maybe the last thing I might note, TJ, and then I want to hear is I do want to say that some artists that I wouldn't have thought might not necessarily be on it did make the list. I want to call out, like, I was glad to see Morrissey on the list, Robert Smith of The Cure, Florence Welch of Florence Plus a Machine, John Fogerty. I expected to be on the list. I wish he would have been a higher, and also Neil Young, because I know he can. Some people like myself love his voice. Other people don't seem to appreciate it as much. I was glad to see that he was on the list. Do you have any kind of thoughts along those lines for you?
I will ask one more. Where are they? Where was Nora Jones? Why
Okay,
isn't she on this list? An incredibly influential vocalist since her first debut album came out in the 90s,
right,
and certainly deserving to be on it. A few things I would mention is, like, here's an entry that baffles me, even though I completely understand his legacy and importance to all the music that we love. Because I think they mentioned in their article here at the opening here, these people can remake the world by just opening their mouths. That was at Rolling Stone's closing comment before you have the list. Did Robert Johnson really change the world with his voice, his singing voice? I would say his guitar playing and songwriting and
right,
his innovation
right.
of the blues, his creation of the blues was what made him important. But I don't know about his voice, if that really puts him in there. And, and
Yeah,
you and I both respect
and they
Robert
def- and they
Johnson
defended it,
tremendously.
and they defended it by saying kind of like his voice kind of did what his guitar did. But I agree with you. When I hear the performances, and his voice is great. I mean, but the recordings are obviously more primitive. They were done back in the 30s.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's more the feel and the sound and the guitar playing. And I think that's a great point you bring up. Maybe that spot should have been held for BB King or something like that.
Because yeah, there is that voice,
You're right.
that's just undeniable. We should probably, say, who do we put at number one and what do we think of the top 10? Because
Right.
people are going to really focus on that top 10. Do you want to talk about that now, or was there any other points you wanted to make first?
Well, I think like we both. So let's say I'm not going to try to wade into who is the greatest singer, who is the greatest vocal. I'm not even
Yeah.
gonna, because I think that is subjective, like we've said.
Yeah.
For me, and it's something I fought for a long. The greatest singer I've ever seen live. I'm going to break it down too because I'm cheating here, TJ.
Sure. Yeah. That's
The
okay.
greatest singer I've ever seen live is Freddie Mercury. I was fortunate when I was very young. I saw Queen with Freddie Mercury 4 times.
Yeah.
Uh, because it was his whole presence I mean, he was just a force of nature. I didn't see Robert Plant. I haven't seen some other greats from that era, but he was incredible and probably paved the way from my appreciation of people like Bono and David Bowie. But Freddie Mercury, to me, for that time, like I saw Paul McCartney in Wings. Paul McCartney was awesome, but Freddie Mercury, the way he commanded with his voice, like the call and response with the audience, he used his voice in a way that I found very dynamic and incredible. So, but for me, and I never got to see him. So the second part would be what singer would have the most impacted me as far as like the emotional touchstones and stuff. That would probably be John Lennon for me. So those two, it's tough for me to say who of those two guys is a better singer. I don't think I can answer that, but those are two great singers that they were on the list, and I would have liked to have seen at least one of them in the top 10. How about you?
Well, it's funny. I don't know who I don't know who the second one would be, but first of all, I'm going to say that by and large, all of the vocalists here in the top 10, with the exception of one of them, I think none of them are undeserving of being in the top 10. Whether you think someone else should be in their place is subjective, but none of them are undeserving with the exception of one. But I will say I have zero problem with Aretha Franklin being number one. I have zero problem with that. She wouldn't be my pick, but I have no problem with her being number one.
I agree with
If
that.
it were my pick, and I had no idea you were. I'm going to say I had no idea you were going to say what you just said. But
Okay.
my number one would have been Freddie Mercury.
Okay.
That's just me. Freddie
Yeah.
Mercury to me is the single best, not just rock vocalist, but
Right.
just one of the single best vocalists
Right.
ever. You know, if there was a voice I could wish for, it would be his.
Yeah.
You know,
And he
um,
didn't just sing rock. He could sing soul. He could sing opera. He could sing,
oh
Broadway
yeah,
style,
yeah,
rockabilly. The guy, that's what I'm saying. He could turn on a dime and do it with
yeah.
authenticity and passion and stuff. I never witnessed anything like that, and like I said, having been a music writer for more than 40 years and stuff, I've seen a lot of great artists, like new ones like Billie Eilish going back, like I said, to the dawn of the 80s and stuff. He was special.
I agree. I agree. But otherwise, though, yeah, because we can all argue about who should be in the top 10. And that's why I almost wonder why, if maybe we shouldn't rank these and do them, just put a list of 200 in no particular order, but I guess we kind of have to. I guess there's no way around it. I almost wish we didn't have to, but I get it.
Yeah.
But everybody who's in the top 10, with the exception of one, and I'm not going to say who, I think they all none of them are undeserving of it. In
Yeah.
fact, I would say the majority of these vocalists that we see here, we've maybe mentioned one or two that we wonder why, we question why they're even there. But all of these vocalists deserve to be in a list. I think we'll both say that the majority of them deserve to be in a list like this for one reason or another. And that at least I would say half, if not more of them, could make the argument why they should be in the top 10
Mhm.
or top 50 or top 20.
Right.
You can easily make arguments as to why they shouldn't be ranked as low as they are.
You're
you
right.
know, and but if I want to do a closing. This is what I'm about to say is probably a closing comment. So before I say it, do you want to say anything else?
No, no, I think we've covered a lot. I mean, I think this discussion, and I always love that about when we get to talk music, TJ. It has me thinking, and I think that you've really kind of said some things that are important, particularly like, there are a handful of artists on here that I would say they continue to have me thinking, would I have put them on this list when so many greats that I really appreciate are not here, but I think, like you said, the majority of these names are ones that are worth for us discovering and kind of appreciating what they
Yeah.
provided music.
I would say the majority of them, yeah, pretty much all of them. At least the ones I recognize, I know who they are, and have at least heard them. I would say they certainly deserve to be on a list like this. And certainly, if I haven't explored their catalogs in any great length, this list provides some impetus for me to do so. I'm certainly not going to listen to everybody, but there are some people here who's like, oh yeah, I've heard them. They're good, but I haven't heard I don't know them that well, but I know they're good.
Right.
And so that may make me say, hey, I should maybe listen a little bit more to so-and-so, whomever it is, beyond just these one or two songs I know them by. But for the names I don't know, I would maybe read about them and say, but again, I think the younger ones should be left off until they've at least had a more recorded history behind them.
Right.
And we know their place in history better. I agree with that.
I fully agree with you on that.
Yeah. But one thing I would say in closing is that it's so easy to jump on the hate Rolling Stone bandwagon, and to a certain extent they want us to do that because that's helping to feed their placement in the media and in the algorithms. They kind of want us to do that. But I would say, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I don't need Rolling Stone to justify my opinions. Even when Rolling Stone covered the music that I love, when they were more in tune with what I was into, when they were more servicing my generation, what they always considered the best was not always what I considered the best, even then. And so I don't need Rolling Stone or anybody to justify my opinions, and nobody out there should. With that, I think you can take a calmer, more rational look at this type of thing and say, perhaps this is actually kind of a cool tool to discover people I haven't really thought about before, and look at it that way instead. Yeah, I don't need them to justify my opinion. Never have, and I never will. And I think we should all just kind of take that approach and instead look at it in a different way. But those are my parting thoughts.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think we're kind of ultimately on the same page. Like, I agree with you on that.
And use this as a platform for conversation, which is, I think, what we're doing today, versus as a platform to just create an echo chamber of negativity and outrage, which is a whole nother thing that I always talk about here, that, there are YouTube channels that are devoted to doing nothing but creating an echo chamber of negativity, because that gets so addictive. It's so easy to get addicted to outrage, especially with the internet culture. Even before, it was easy to do. But yeah, the internet has certainly amplified it. So anyways, though, so I guess at this point, let's just ask everybody what they thought. Who do you think should have been included that wasn't? Who do you think should have been number one? And go ahead. Who do you think should have been ranked higher, and for what reason? And that, again, I wish Rolling Stone had broken it down. Why did we put them in this ranking? Maybe that's asking too much. I don't know. But I think there could have been some kind of graph, like, vocal ability, influence, maybe in some cases the influence rate's higher than the vocal ability. You may not know this person, but they were one of the pioneers and they don't get the attention they deserve, but they help influence all the people you do like.
Right.
That kind of thing. So yeah, but there you go. Let us know what you thought and leave us your comments. As always, if you like these videos, hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. I want to say thank you to the patron supporters. Patron supporters receive exclusive weekly videos not available on the channel, and they get their names in the credits. And if you can't be a patron supporter, we understand. But if you do want to throw a little support at us, please click the super thanks button. And you can do it anonymously, or you can leave a comment. And we appreciate it very much. Or if you can't do that, just hit like. And looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say about this. And anyways, we'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.